Everyone admired Michael. He owned luxury cars, lived in a beautiful mansion, traveled whenever he wanted, and never had to worry about money. People often looked at him and said, "He has everything." But they were wrong. Every morning, Michael woke up with the same heavy feeling in his chest. His house was silent. Breakfast was always served at a long table meant for 10 people, yet he always sat there alone. One evening, after another exhausting day of meetings, he decided to take a walk through the city. As he passed a small park, he noticed an elderly man sitting on an old wooden bench. The man was wearing worn-out clothes and holding a simple paper bag with a sandwich inside. A few moments later, 2 little children ran toward him with huge smiles. The old man laughed, hugged them tightly, and together they shared that single sandwich as if it were the greatest feast in the world. Their laughter filled the park. For a moment, Michael couldn't stop watching. He had enjoyed meals worth thousands of dollars, yet he had never smiled like that. Curious, he walked over and asked, "How can you be so happy when you have so little?" The old man smiled gently. "I don't have little," he replied. "I have people who are happy to see me every day." Those words stayed with Michael. That night, he walked through his empty mansion and realized something he had ignored for years. He had spent his whole life building his fortune, but almost no time building relationships. He had missed birthdays because of business meetings. He had skipped family dinners to answer phone calls. He had always promised, "I'll make time later," but later had never come. The next morning, he made a decision that surprised everyone. He began working fewer hours. He visited his parents more often. He called old friends he hadn't spoken to in years. He started having dinner with his family without checking his phone every few minutes. For the first time in many years, the house no longer felt empty. The laughter he had heard in the park slowly found its way into his own home. Michael was still rich, but this time he was rich in something money could never buy, because he finally understood that success can fill your bank account, but only love, friendship, and time can truly fill your heart. Sometimes the poorest person can feel like the richest in the world, and the richest person can feel completely empty. Every morning, Daniel's mother packed him the same simple lunch: 2 slices of bread, a little cheese, and an apple. It wasn't much, but it was all they could afford. At school, while the other children opened colorful lunch boxes filled with snacks and sweets, Daniel quietly sat on a bench under an old tree. One day, he noticed a new boy sitting alone. His name was Adam. He wasn't eating anything. Daniel walked over and asked, "Did you forget your lunch?" Adam looked down and whispered, "No, we just don't have enough food at home." Without saying another word, Daniel cut his sandwich in half and handed one piece to Adam. From that day on, every single afternoon, Daniel shared half of his lunch, half a sandwich, half an apple, sometimes even the last cookie his mother had secretly placed inside. He never told anyone, not his classmates, not his teachers, not even his mother. Months passed. The 2 boys became inseparable. Then one day, Adam suddenly stopped coming to school. Weeks turned into months. No one knew where he had gone. Life moved on. Years later, Daniel was working at a small bookstore. One rainy afternoon, a well-dressed man walked in. He smiled the moment he saw Daniel. "You probably don't remember me," he said. Daniel looked carefully, but couldn't. "I'm Adam." Daniel's eyes filled with surprise. Adam continued, When we were children, your lunch was often the only meal I ate that day. I never forgot your kindness." He reached into his pocket and handed Daniel an envelope. Inside was a letter. It wasn't money, it wasn't a gift. It simply said, "You taught me that even when someone has very little, they can still give someone hope." Adam smiled. "Today I run a foundation that feeds thousands of children every year. And it all started with half of your sandwich." Daniel stood there speechless. He had never imagined that one small act of kindness could grow into something so much bigger. Sometimes, the smallest things we give become the biggest reason someone never gives up. Morning at exactly 9 o'clock, an old man named Thomas walked slowly to the same little mailbox at the end of his street. His neighbors saw him every day, rain or sunshine, winter or summer. He always opened the mailbox, looked inside for a few seconds, then quietly closed it and walked back home. Most people thought it was just part of his routine, but no one knew the real reason. 20 years earlier, Thomas had argued with his only son. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about anything important. It started with a few angry words. Words spoken in the heat of the moment. His son packed a small suitcase that same evening. Before leaving, he stood at the front door and said, "Maybe one day I'll write to you." Then he walked away. Thomas wanted to stop him. He wanted to apologize. But pride can be louder than love. The next morning, he told himself he'll come back in a few days. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Months became years. No phone calls, no visits, no letters. Still, every single morning Thomas checked the mailbox. His neighbors often asked, "Are you expecting something important?" Thomas always smiled gently. "Maybe today?" As the years passed, his hair turned white. His steps became slower. The old wooden house grew quieter every season. But the mailbox remained the first place he visited every morning. One cold autumn afternoon, a young mail carrier noticed him standing by the mailbox longer than usual. She walked over and asked, "Has someone forgotten to write to you?" Thomas looked at the empty mailbox and smiled sadly. "No. I'm just waiting for someone to forgive me." The young woman never forgot those words. A few weeks later, she shared the story with a local newspaper. It was a small article. Just a few paragraphs about an old man who had waited 20 years for one letter from his son. No one expected what happened next. The story spread across the country. Thousands of people read it. Then one evening, a man sitting alone in another city saw the article. His hands began to shake. It was Thomas's son. For years, he had written countless letters in his mind, but he had never found the courage to send even one. That night, he didn't write. He bought a train ticket. The next morning, Thomas was sitting by the window, holding his cup of tea. Suddenly, someone knocked on the front door. He opened it slowly. Standing there was a man with gray hair beginning to appear at his temples. Neither of them spoke. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then the son whispered, "I'm sorry, I took too long." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. He smiled through them and replied, "I've been waiting every single day." Without another word, they embraced. 20 years of silence disappeared in a single hug. Later that afternoon, the mail carrier walked past the house. For the first time in 20 years, the mailbox remained closed. It no longer mattered. Because sometimes, the message we've been waiting for doesn't arrive inside an envelope. Sometime, it walks through the front door. Never let pride steal the time you could spend with the people you love, because some letters can wait, but life cannot. Every morning just after sunrise, an old man walked slowly along the edge of a dusty country road. In one hand, he carried a small shovel. In the other, a cloth bag filled with tiny tree saplings. The people in the village had grown used to seeing him. Some smiled politely. Others simply shook their heads. One morning, a young man stopped his bicycle and asked, "Sir, why do you keep planting trees?" The old man smiled without stopping his work. "Because one day they'll give shade." The young man laughed. "But you'll never live long enough to sit under them." The old man looked at the tiny tree he had just placed into the ground. "I know." "Then what's the point?" For a moment, the old man remained silent. Then he gently pressed the soil around the little tree. "When I was your age," he said softly, "I rested under trees that someone else planted. I never met those people, but every summer they made my life better." The young man had no answer. He shrugged his shoulders and rode away, day after day, week after week. The old man continued planting, sometimes one tree, sometimes 5, sometimes only one small sapling because his back hurt too much. The seasons changed. Spring became summer. Summer became autumn. Autumn became winter. Yet every time the ground allowed it, he returned with another young tree. Many people still didn't understand. Children, however, became curious. One little girl often watched him from across the road. One afternoon, she finally gathered the courage to ask, "Grandpa, aren't you tired?" He smiled. "Very." "Then why don't you stay home?" The old man chuckled. "Because these trees are still waiting for me." She looked at the small sapling in his hands. "But you'll be very old when they're big." "I probably won't be here anymore." The little girl frowned. "Doesn't that make you sad?" The old man looked toward the open fields stretching into the distance. "No. It makes me grateful." She tilted her head. "For what?" "For having the chance to leave something beautiful behind." The little girl smiled. The next morning she appeared with a tiny watering can. "I came to help." The old man's eyes filled with tears. Together they planted tree after tree. Soon other children joined them, then their parents. Little by little, what had once been an empty road began to change. Years passed. The old man grew weaker. One winter he planted his final tree. As he stood up, leaning heavily on his shovel, he quietly whispered, "Take good care of this one." A few weeks later, the village bells rang. The old man was gone. For the first time in years, the road felt empty, but the trees remained. They kept growing. 1 year became 5. 5 became 10. Their branches stretched toward the sky. Birds built nests among the leaves. Families gathered beneath the shade during hot summers. Children laughed where there had once been nothing but dry soil. One afternoon, a little boy asked his mother, "Who planted all these beautiful trees?" She pointed toward an old wooden bench near the road. "There was once a man who believed that not everything we do has to benefit us. He planted them for people he would never meet." The little boy looked around at the cool shade surrounding him. Then he quietly whispered, "I wish I could thank him." His mother smiled. "You can." "How?" She handed him a tiny tree sapling. "Plant one for someone else." The boy carefully dug a small hole beside the path. As he covered the roots with soil, he smiled. Without realizing it, the old man's kindness had continued growing just like the trees. Some people measure a life by the money they leave behind, others by the houses they build or the success they achieve. But sometimes, the greatest legacy is something much quieter. A tree whose shade you will never enjoy, a kindness you'll never see returned, a seed planted for someone you'll never meet. Because the most beautiful things we leave behind are often the ones that were never meant for us. David was known as one of the hardest working men in the city. He arrived at the office before sunrise and was often the last person to leave. Everyone admired his determination. One day, he always said, all of this hard work will be worth it. His wife smiled every time she heard those words. His little daughter believed them. Every evening she would run to the front door the moment she heard his car. "Daddy, will you play with me today?" David would kiss her forehead, smile, and gently reply, "Not today, sweetheart. I have a little more work to finish. I promise we'll play this weekend." But when the weekend arrived, there was another meeting, another business trip, another important phone call. The weekends became months. The months became years. His daughter stopped waiting by the front door. She stopped asking him to play. Instead, she quietly learned that her father was always busy. One afternoon, she drew a picture at school. It showed a little girl standing alone in a park. Far away, there was a man wearing a suit, holding a briefcase. When the teacher asked who he was, she answered, "That's my daddy. He works very hard." The teacher smiled and asked, "Does he come to the park with you?" The little girl looked down. "No, but maybe when he isn't busy anymore." The teacher placed the drawing in an envelope and mailed it to David's office. When he opened it during lunch, he stared at the picture for a long time. For a moment, he felt something tighten inside his chest. But then his phone rang. Another client, another meeting. He folded the drawing and placed it inside his desk drawer. "I'll think about this later," he whispered. Later never came. Years passed. His daughter grew up. She left for university. Then she found a job in another city. The house became quieter every year. One evening, David returned home earlier than usual, for the first time in decades. His calendar was empty. No meetings, no deadlines, no urgent phone calls. He looked around the silent house. The toys were gone. The drawings had disappeared from the refrigerator. The laughter that once filled every room had been replaced by silence. He walked into the attic, searching through old boxes. There, between dusty photo albums, he found the drawing his daughter had made as a child. The little girl, the lonely park, the father holding a briefcase. Suddenly, tears filled his eyes. At that moment, he finally understood something no amount of money could ever teach him. Success had given him everything, except the moments he could never get back. The next morning, he picked up his phone and called his daughter. When she answered, there was a brief silence. Then he said, "I know this won't give you back your childhood, but if you still have time, I'd love to spend some of it with you." There was another silence. Then she smiled through tears. "I've been waiting for that call for a very long time." That weekend, they met in the same park she had once dreamed of visiting with him. They walked for hours. They laughed. They talked about everything they had missed. It wasn't enough to erase the years that had passed, but it was enough to remind them that love doesn't disappear just because time does. As the sun began to set, David looked at his daughter and quietly said, "I I spent my whole life trying to build a future, and I forgot to live the present." His daughter gently took his hand. "We still have today," she whispered. David smiled. He had finally learned the value of time, but he also learned something just as important. As long as we are alive, there is still time to love, to forgive, and to be present. Because money can always be earned again. Success can always be rebuilt. But a single moment with the people you love, once it's gone, can never be bought back. Don't wait until it's too late to understand the value of time. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't money. It's simply being there. Born into a poor family in a small town where life was never easy. Their house was old, with cracked walls and a roof that leaked every time it rained. During the winter, the cold crept inside no matter how tightly the windows were closed. They didn't have much. Some days they barely had enough food for dinner. But Lucas never felt unloved. His mother, Anna, was a simple woman with gentle eyes and a heart bigger than anything money could ever buy. Every morning before walking him to school, she would kneel in front of him, straighten his little jacket, smile, and say, "Never be ashamed of where you come from, Lucas. Kindness is worth more than riches." Lucas would nod, even though he was too young to understand what those words truly meant. His father was different. For months he searched for work, but every door seemed to close in his face. The bills kept piling up. The cupboard grew emptier every week. The pressure became too much. Instead of facing the struggle with his family, he chose to run from it. One cold morning before the sun had risen, he quietly packed a small bag. He left a short note on the kitchen table. It read, "I'm sorry, I can't live like this anymore." Then he walked away. He never looked back. Lucas was only 6 years old. He waited by the window all evening, believing his father would come home. But he never did. Anna cried that night after Lucas had fallen asleep. Not because she had lost her husband, but because she knew her son had just lost his father. The next morning, she wiped away her tears, smiled, and made Lucas breakfast as if nothing had happened. From that day on, she became both mother and father. She cleaned houses during the day. She washed dishes in a small restaurant at night. When everyone else was sleeping, she sat by the kitchen table sewing clothes for neighbors to earn a few extra dollars. Sometimes she worked 16 hours a day, yet somehow she still found the energy to read Lucas a bedtime story every night, no matter how tired she was. Years passed. Lucas noticed things children usually don't. He noticed that his mother always said she wasn't hungry, so he could eat the last piece of bread. He noticed the holes in her shoes that she tried to hide. He noticed how she smiled at him, even on the days when her eyes were full of exhaustion. One afternoon after school, Lucas quietly asked, "Mom, are we poor?" Anna looked at him, smiled softly, and held his hand. "We may not have much money, but we have each other. And as long as we have love, we'll always have something worth fighting for." Lucas hugged her tightly. From that day on, he decided he wanted to help. He started delivering newspapers before school. After classes, he carried groceries for elderly neighbors. He washed bicycles. He collected empty bottles to recycle. Every coin he earned went into a small metal box hidden under his bed. He never spent a single dollar. His dream was simple. One day, he wanted to buy his mother the warm winter coat she always admired in the shop window, the one she would stop and look at for just a few seconds before quietly walking away. Then, everything changed. One rainy afternoon, Anna suddenly collapsed while cleaning a house. Her employer immediately called an ambulance. Lucas rushed to the hospital as fast as his little legs could carry him. He found his mother lying in a hospital bed trying to smile despite the pain. The doctor gently placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "Your mother is very sick. We can help her, but she needs treatment as soon as possible." Lucas looked at the doctor with frightened eyes. "Will she be okay?" The doctor hesitated. "If we start treatment soon, she has a chance." That night, Lucas couldn't sleep. He sat beside his mother's bed, holding her hand while she rested. As she opened her eyes, she whispered, "Don't worry about me." He forced a smile. "I'll take care of everything, Mom." She gently stroked his hair. "You're still just a little boy." Lucas squeezed her hand. "No, from today, I'll be whatever I need to be." The next morning, before the sun rose, Lucas left the hospital with one thought in his mind. He had no money, no family to ask for help, no one to turn to. But he had made a promise, and no matter what it took, he was going to save his mother. The morning after leaving the hospital, Lucas walked through the town with tears in his eyes. He knocked on every door where he thought someone might have work for him. "Can I wash your car?" "No." "Can I clean your yard?" "We don't need help." "Can I carry your groceries?" "You're too young." Hour after hour, he searched for a way to earn enough money. Every evening, he returned to the hospital with only a few small coins in his pocket. Anna smiled every time she saw him. "You should be home resting." Lucas forced a smile. "I will, after you get better." She gently held his hand. "I don't want you to lose your childhood because of me." Lucas looked into her tired eyes. "I already decided. You've spent your whole life taking care of me. Now it's my turn." Days passed. The little metal box under his bed slowly filled with coins. But it wasn't enough. Not even close. One cold afternoon, Lucas sat alone on the sidewalk outside the hospital. For the first time in his life, he felt completely hopeless. He looked at the people walking by. Some wore expensive suits. Others carried shopping bags filled with things they probably didn't need. Lucas took a deep breath. His hands trembled. Slowly, he picked up a piece of cardboard and wrote 3 simple words. "Please help us." Beneath them, he added, "My mother is sick." He sat quietly. People passed by. Some didn't even look at him. Others shook their heads. A few whispered, "He's probably lying." One man crumpled the cardboard and threw it back at him. Lucas picked it up without saying a word. His eyes filled with tears, but he refused to cry. As the sun began to set, an elderly man slowly approached him. His clothes were old. His shoes were worn out. He didn't look rich. In fact, he looked as though life had been just as hard on him. The old man sat beside Lucas. "What happened, son?" Lucas tried to be strong, but the words came out between tears. "My mom needs treatment. I've tried everything. I don't know what else to do." The old man quietly reached into his pocket. After searching for a few moments, he pulled out a small folded envelope. Inside were a few bills. Lucas looked at him. "You don't have to." The old man smiled gently. "I know, but I want to." Lucas noticed his hands shaking. "Is this all your money?" The old man laughed softly. "Money comes and goes. But if we stop helping each other, we lose something much more important." Lucas couldn't hold back his tears anymore. The old man placed the envelope in his hand and gently closed Lucas's fingers around it. Then he looked him in the eyes and said, Never lose hope, son. Those 4 words stayed with Lucas forever, with the help of that money. And after the hospital agreed to let Anna begin treatment while the remaining costs were arranged, hope returned. The treatment was long. There were difficult days when Lucas thought he might lose her. But Anna never stopped fighting. Neither did Lucas. Months later, the doctor walked into the room with a smile. The treatment worked. Your mother is going home. Lucas ran across the room and hugged her as tightly as he could. For the first time in months, they both cried with relief. Life slowly became normal again. Lucas continued studying harder than ever. He never forgot the promise he had made to himself while sitting beside his mother's hospital bed. One day, he would become the kind of person who could save others. Years passed. The little boy who once begged for help became a respected doctor. Patients trusted him, not only because he was skilled, but because he treated every person with kindness. One rainy evening, an ambulance arrived at the hospital. An elderly man had collapsed. He had no family, no insurance, no money. Lucas walked into the examination room. The moment he saw the man's face, his heart stopped. It was him, the old man, older now, weaker, but unmistakably the same person who had once given away the last money he had. The old man didn't recognize Lucas. He smiled politely. "I'm sorry, doctor. I can't afford much." Lucas smiled back. "Don't worry about that. You've already paid more than enough." The old man looked confused. After a successful surgery and several weeks of recovery, he was finally ready to leave the hospital. At the reception desk, he nervously asked, "How much do I owe?" The nurse smiled. "Nothing. Your bill has already been paid." She handed him a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. "Years ago, you gave a frightened little boy the only money you had because his mother was dying. You told him, 'Never lose hope.' Those words changed his life forever. Today, that little boy had the honor of taking care of you. Thank you for saving my mother and for teaching me that kindness is the greatest gift we can leave behind." The old man's hands trembled. Tears slowly rolled down his face. He looked around the hospital, hoping to find the doctor. But Lucas had already returned to his patients. Not because he wanted recognition, Shija, but because true kindness doesn't ask to be remembered. It simply hopes to inspire someone else to do the same. One small act of kindness can change a life. Sometimes it changes 2.